What's up, guys? Welcome to Powerline Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Ryan Lucas. All right, this week's guest, his name is Justin Tate. Justin works for a company called FallTech. FallTech is brand new to the industry. They deal with fall arrest, fall restraint, safety equipment. The reason I brought Justin on is to talk about this. Justin's a lineman in the past that's moved into this new era, this new industry of safety, new to him, industry of safety and safety gear. And I thought it's super interesting to have a lineman's perspective talk about this gear. We get into some details about it, which is super awesome because a lot of the time you don't want to just hear this kind of stuff directly from salespeople. It helps a lot if that salesperson has a background in the trade, and Justin does. Justin's, like I said, he's a lineman from the past. So we talk a lot about his past and a lot about line work, and then get into the safety and safety gear. I think you guys are going to get a lot of value out of this one. You mentioned some things that, again, you might not hear from a typical sales guy. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Justin Tate. Flying airplanes is on my bucket list. It's next for me.
I've been saying that for the last 10 years.
Yeah, same.
Just kind of jokingly, but serious at the same time, because
Yeah.
it's like, man, if I got my pilot's license, I could rent a plane and then not have to connect anywhere and just go.
I would rather it take me 10 hours to fly here and stop 18 times than get on a fucking Air Canada
Commercial
flight.
jet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so yeah, I've thought about it. I've got an airport that I can take lessons like literally 7 minutes from my house.
What's the hang up then? Why?
Time. Yeah. With the kids and
Don't let it slip from you.
I know, dude. That's what
I know I've got to eat my own advice here.
Your Everest thing, right?
Yeah.
It took you how long?
Yeah. Fuck.
To
I think I first started talking about going to Everest probably, I want to say 2008, 9 was kind of when I got the bug.
Okay.
2008. I wanted to climb big mountains before that, which is funny because I never really did it. I think it was because when I left high school, and we're just gonna roll right into this from here. When I left high school, I decided to become a lineman, get in the line trade, and almost instantly when I started climbing poles, it felt very natural. Just took to it easily. I was pretty athletic. I played ice hockey quite competitively up to that point in life. I quit ice hockey right after high school. I decided not to go any further with it, quit that. But as soon as I got into line work, climbing poles and doing line work you got to be fairly athletic, like it helps to be athletic.
Oh yeah.
Let's put it that way. Not everybody that does is athletic. They should be, but they're not. But it helps anyway. So I took to climbing poles. I really liked climbing. I just loved everything about climbing poles, climbing towers, those sorts of things. So I thought, well, why not mountains next, right? So I started like geeking out on mountains. And I started reading all the books I could read on these guys that have traveled the world and climbed the biggest mountains in the world. There's this one guy, Reinhold, I'm probably saying his name wrong, but Reinhold Messner. He's out of like Austria or something like that. And this guy developed this, they called it the Alpine Ascent. He called it the Alpine Ascent, where everyone else was doing this approach where you'd set up camp. You'd set up base camp. Like take Everest, for example. You'd set up base camp and then you'd acclimatize for a while at base camp. Base camp's like 18,000 feet or something like that. You'd acclimatize there for a while, and then you'd climb through the Khumbu Icefall, and you'd set up at Camp 1, and you'd hang out there for a day or two and acclimatize a bit more, and then you'd come back down to base camp, and then you go back to Camp 1, and you do this like repetitive, like, okay, now we'll hit Camp 2, and then we'll come back to Camp 1, and then go to Camp 2, and it takes you a month and a half to climb the freaking mountain.
Holy
so
smoke.
Reinhold shows up, and in one day, no oxygen, no backpack, no nothing. Just hits the top of the mountain, sticks his flag in the top, and hikes down and is like, peace, I'm out of here. I'll see ya.
Check.
Yeah, check. Everest, done. On to K2. And he went around and climbed all the biggest mountains in the world. And I was fascinated by these stories. Once I read that story, it was in a book called, I think it was in a book called Eiger Dreams. John Krakauer, I think, wrote that book. And he's the same guy that wrote Into the Wild about Christopher McCandless. Yep. And he went and climbed Everest as well. He was a bit of like a journalist and reporter or whatever. So he went to climb Everest to see what the big thing was all about. And on his trip up, I think like something like 9 out of the 13 of them passed away on the descent in a big storm, and he actually made it. And he just writes about how it was the stupidest experience of his whole life. He has no idea why he did it. Like, he's like, I got there and it was just ridiculous. Like, this was dumb. Why am I here? Why did I come here? And anyway, so he wrote a book called Into Thin Air. It was all about that Everest expedition.
That would kind of suck, huh? Losing 9 people.
Yeah, it's horrible. It was like, at that time, I think it was one of the biggest single losses of life on the mountain. Because I think this was like, I want to say it was like early 2000s that he did this.
Dang.
Yeah. Yes. But anyway, it's interesting. I'm always fascinated by like people who do things that are a little squirrely.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I don't do anything nearly like that.
What gear do you have in your brain?
We go hiking every year. My cousin and I would do a guys trip, 3 of us, just keep the family together kind of. And so this year we did the Yarnell fire hike in Arizona.
Okay.
Where the firefighters burned up saving the town, the hot shots.
Okay.
They made a movie about it called Only the Brave. So we did that hike. And dude, I'm telling you, like, there's no way. Like, that's only 5 or 6 miles, 8 miles round trip, you know. But it was grueling enough for a guy that doesn't climb poles anymore and sits in airplanes and hotels. It's like, no. So I can imagine going to the top of Everest in a day.
No.
That's a different mentality.
That's why I set base camp.
That's Goggins, dude.
Yeah,
right?
That's Goggins, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, this mountain ain't nothing.
Yeah. Get it. Yeah. Totally. That's why I set base camp as my new summit. That's all I could do.
And you said it was days, right?
Yeah, it was days.
Just to get to base camp.
Yeah, it was. So it's a grueling trip. Like, Nepal is 36 hours of flying just to get to the country. And then it was like, it started by getting up at 2:00 in the morning, getting in a tiny little van with 12 other people who you just met the day before. And this little guy that can't speak very good English throws all your bags on the top of the van, ties it down with a rope. And I'm watching him, like, okay, as a lineman, I'm watching this guy tie my bags on the roof of this van. And it's everything I just had to like submit, just be like, you know what? If my bags don't make it, it's Nepal. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I'm sure somebody coming along will pick these things up and bring them. We're all going to the same place. So we're in this van and you're through, they call them the hills because they're not mountains yet, because the mountains are the Himalayan mountains. So all these, like, they call quote unquote hills to anywhere else in the world. These are mountains. They're bigger than anything in the United States, you know, for the most part. They're the foothills, they call them. And really, it's the size of the Rocky Mountains. This is what you're driving through just to get to this little airport so you can fly into the mountains. And so it's 4 hours through the hill country, Nepal, in this tiny little van in the middle of the night, in the dark, windy dirt roads with big rock trucks and shit passing you. It's like crazy. Just to get this little airport, load all your shit on this tiny little plane, and fly into the most dangerous airport in the world, they call it. It's the Lukla airport. It's like, I think the runway is something like 300 meters or something. Like, it's the shortest. And it's an uphill runway into the mountain. So you just have, it's uphill into the mountain. So the uphill helps stop them too, helps you
brake,
slow
down.
But then when you're leaving, it's like just a cliff at the end. I flew out in a helicopter. So I landed in an airplane. I flew out of Lukla in a helicopter when I left, and he flew down the runway. So I got a video of going down the runway and leaving, and it's just drop off. So like you got to power up or you're not.
Yeah.
Like
there's no room for second chances.
Then that's how you start the trip. You started at like, I think it's like 2,300 meters, something like that. I don't know what that translates to into feet. Like, sorry, you guys do the translation, but 2,300 meters, and that's where you start. And then you hike for like 7 days to get to 5,300 meters. That's Everest Base Camp, which is like 18,000 feet. And you're climbing the whole way. It's cool. It's my summit. I don't know. But like a piece of me standing at base camp, you can only see. So Everest is massive, but it's what people don't get. It's not like you're standing at the bottom of Everest. You're standing at the bottom of another mountain that's beside it. So like, and then it's the Himalayan mountains. Everything is big. So Everest is quite hidden. So you don't get to like just like see Everest, but you can see the top of it. You can see the tip, the very top of Mount Everest that's there, and there's like wind blowing snow off the top. And there's a piece of me that's just like, Everest is just calling out, like, I'm not that far. Like, you can see me. I'm right here. Just come on up.
So like, how many days is it to the top, to summit?
It depends on how you do it. It's if you want to summit, the way that most people do it is that acclimatization way, where it takes a month to do it. And yeah, it takes a month. Usually most of the time people climb it in spring. So like, I think it's like April, May, June is kind of like the time where most people try.
I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, no, I know. It's crazy because you're actually like, they call the 20,000 foot mark, which I think is the camp 4-ish on the mountain. So anything above 20,000 feet, there's actually not enough oxygen to sustain life. So you're technically dying. Every minute above 20,000 feet, you're dying. So if that's it.
So hurry up.
Yeah, but you can't hurry up. It's crazy. It's actually kind of a wild place. Like reading all these books and listening to all these stories, you'd hear about acclimatization and how altitude like really, really affects the body. And you're always kind of like, oh, sure, whatever. Let's see. I can do this. I'm tough, right? Like, altitude. What's that? But then you get in it, and it screws you up, like big time. Like you can't. It's everything you can do to stuff your sleeping bag back in your sack. Like I was sitting on the ground in the last morning, just breathing so heavy and trying to stuff the sleeping bag back in the sack. And it was like, push a little bit, just sit there. And it was like 10 breaths, just trying to get enough energy to just like push it again. Like, and I was thinking the whole time, like, geez, it's no joke. Like, this is for real.
And we still got a ways to go to get up there. Yeah. So I wonder, did they ever study that dude to figure out how he was able to just zip up there and zip down? Like, you gotta be made different.
So you mentioned like paying attention and studying Goggins. I think they're cut from the same rock, just mentality. Right? I think that it's mentality mixed with some natural gift, right? Like there's some genetics, and like you look at a guy like, I don't know if you've seen 14 Peaks, I think it's called. It's about Nimsday. He's a Nepalese Sherpa he joined the Gurkhas back in the day. I think that's their version of special forces or whatever. Came out of that, and anyway, he climbed all 14 peaks in something like 36 days, like the tallest mountains in the world, in like a month and a half. It's crazy. So he did a documentary on it. But those guys are just like, they're built different, just straight
100%.
up built different in the head, but they're also like genetically just different, right? They've got something in there. Actually, I don't know. Like you look at Goggins though. I think Goggins just is all in his head.
Oh yeah,
For sure. I don't know that he's built special. He's
just like, that's what I'm doing, and I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
And I'll see you guys in 3 days when I get done running 100 miles or whatever it is he does.
What from his mentality intrigues you?
The entire mindset, like how, like I'm sure you're familiar with his story, but he was like 300 pounds, couldn't even get in the military. And well, now I'm going to lose weight and I'm going to get in the military. And then now we're going to razz the drill instructors, in our boat crew, we're going to razz the drill instructors. And like, just how, like, if you put your mind to it, not everybody can do it, right? You can say, oh, I'm going to put my mind to it. I'm going to do this or that, X, Y, Z. Well, a lot of people break. Mm-hmm. And so, like, for that dude, like, you couldn't pay me $1 million, Ryan, to run 100 miles. Yeah. Like, it ain't happening physically. I couldn't do it. Yeah. But that dude's just like, yeah, I was watching something a couple days ago on him. And his wife's like, yeah, here we are, Christmas or whatever. It was a holiday or something. And he woke up and decided he was going to run 100 miles. So I'm following him in the car, and it's like 20 degrees outside or whatever. And he's just going for a run. Yeah. Like, I mean, to me, that's super interesting.
He's broken while doing it too. Like, he talks about it being, he was just on Andrew Huberman's podcast. I think it was Huberman. Yeah. And he said for the first few miles, like first 10, 20 miles, he's got broken knees still. He's got like broken body. Like the pain that guy puts himself through just to do this and get past this point.
Yeah. For what?
I don't know.
Going for a run.
Just doing it because 99.9% of us won't.
Right.
That's why.
No, I mean, yeah. And that's, I mean, I have gotten a lot lazier since I got out of the trade, or got out of my tools, I guess. I'll never get out of the trade, I don't think. But like coming out of my tools and sitting in airports and hotels and eating out every day, like I've gotten a lot lazier than I was when I was in my tools. Hell, I'm buying firewood now instead of making my own. It's like I don't want to go chop that firewood. But 10 years ago, go get chainsaw and gas and let's go. Let's split her up and we're going to go make some wood, But I find that my mental tenacity's tarnished a bit since I'm not out in the elements every day working and stuff like that. And to see guys like that, it's kind of like, wow, if he can run 100 miles, I can get off my butt and run 3, Yeah. But it's those guys are just built different, and it's fun to follow them and kind of get amped up from them a little bit. Like Gary V, an immigrant from Belarus that couldn't speak our language.
Yeah, he's done amazing things.
Self-made dude. Yeah. But even him, we were talking earlier about, cut from a different cloth and grew up hard. He was in his dad's wine store or liquor store when he was like 10 years old, packing bags of ice and doing whatever needed to be done to get the job done, just to survive. And I think a lot of that's gone in our society today. Yeah. I don't think there's as much of that out there. We're lucky in the line trade, I guess, that it takes a little bit of a different person, and guys are more apt to do what needs to be done to get the job done. But there's a lot of, like we were talking last night, there's a lot of softness in the generation that we're in now as compared to 20 years ago. But yeah, so those Gary V, David Goggins, those were kind of like my pump up guys.
Those are two separate guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like I like that dichotomy there. Like those are two wildly different.
Well, yeah, it's like in a family, right? That's your mom and your dad, totally. Right?
I'm not sure those two will ever connect in life.
Goggins will beat the crap out of you.
The one thing they do have in common is they're like New York Times best-selling authors, I guess.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's what I fire my truck up like we were talking, 4:30 in the morning. go hit the road, and I'd play Gary V's intro song, Yeah. And I listened to that every stinking morning, just to get pumped up and ready to hit the road and go do what I was doing. So
I love that. Let's wind it back a little bit and start with where you're from.
Where I'm from. Yeah. So this is interesting. I consider myself a Texan transplant. Born in Dallas, Texas. Born in Dallas and lived in San Antonio for a handful of years. Then my folks split up, so moved back with my mother to Indiana. Been there my whole life since, but I can still claim that I'm a Texan transplant. My wife hates it. She's like, "You're stupid. You've lived in Indiana for 41 years. You're an Indiana boy." But I still throw that out there. So moved back home with my mother. That's where my grandparents were, and spent a bunch of time on. My grandpa had a little cattle farm, and we raised, 30, 40 head of cattle, just enough to eat, sell some. He had farmed previously. And then this was kind of like his little retirement thing, was raising cattle. And so I got to come up on that part of it. And then we rented a farmhouse. My mother did. And then when I was 12-ish, she met a guy. They bought a house. And that's kind of an interesting story there. We talked a little bit last night about it. So awesome guy comes into my mom's life. They buy a house together, and it's 3 acres. And we had to push more. So every Saturday, that was my job. That's chores.
Yeah.
To live in the house, eat the food, you're going to mow the grass. And so we push mowed 3 acres. And that's really where it started for me, I think.
I know what that's like. We had 5 acres. And so, that wasn't all push mow, but there was a good, acre and a half of push mowing to be done. And
my stepdad, who's kind of like my dad, he's like, "Yeah, we do this for exercise. I got to push more for exercise." And I'm like, "Well, I'm mowing the grass. How's it for exercise?" But it was noticed in the community. Farmers stopped by and was, "Hey, why don't you come see what you're doing here? Why don't you come hang out with me on the farm?" And so that was my first job at 12, 13 years old, probably, picking rocks up out of a field. And a couple of years later, driving $500,000 worth of equipment down the road, waving to my stepdad, "Hey, Pops, look what I'm doing now." And he still brings it up. He's like, "Dude, you were so proud to drive that equipment up and down the road." And I was, a sense of accomplishment, right? And I think in the trade, that's what at the end of the day, we need something tangible.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the hardest transitions into a sales role is, like, what did I really do at the end of the day? Like, what can you put? I can't look back and see that we set 10 pulls and strung wire and stuff. But so that was where it started, and worked on another farm in high school, and we raised 12,000 head of hog farrow to finish a year, which is a pretty good number. They eat all the time. We ground all our own feed and got rid of the waste ourselves. And so it was a pretty decent size operation, and it was a lot of hard work for not a lot of money. Still got the hogs still have to eat on Christmas.
I want to explore that a little bit too, because I think that's like, we're kind of like at Quanta branching into that ranch rodeo community for a reason that, it kind of breeds good tradespeople, that community does, right? And I didn't come from ranch rodeo, but I spent every day of my childhood outside. My mother would kick my brother and I out the door all summer long, kicks out in the morning, lock the door. And crazy story, actually. I remember we were being a pain in the ass in the house, and this was pretty early in the morning. We were just causing shit, two brothers do. And so she kicked us outside and locked the door, and she started doing chores and cleaning the house, and probably just put her headphones on and her Walkman and ran around the house vacuuming or something. I don't know what she's doing, but we weren't allowed inside. Weren't allowed in. Go play outside. Get out of my hair. And I went over the hill. This hill right on the other side of the driveway. Went over the hill because I could see some smoke, and legit friggin' grass fire got away from our neighbor. It was later spring, so he's just burning some grass,
burning ditches.
But it got away. It was a dry spring. Like he shouldn't full on fires coming towards our house, and we're banging on the door. Actually, it was spring. It was April because it was April 1st. I remember that.
Okay.
Because we're banging on the door. I'm like, Mom, there's a fire. She's like, bullshit. It's April 1st. You're not getting me, you little jerks. No, seriously. Anyway, yeah. Grass fire, other side of the hill, coming towards fire department there. A few minutes later, oh shit, I guess this is real. Fire trucks are here. Okay, I'll let the kids back in.
Yeah, she hears the scream of the sirens and stuff, and is like, oh crap, what's that? Oh, sorry, boys.
But we grew up outside, is what I was getting at. Outside. We rode dirt bikes all summer, played hockey all winter. So when I got into the trades, things like driving and simple mechanics and clutches and shit like that. You understood all of that kind of stuff already, that a lot of that just came natural. You were athletic, you knew how to work hard. My parents were great examples of what it was to work hard.
Absolutely.
He ran a small business. They both ran the small business. Mom ran the front of it. Dad ran the back of it, and that's the way it worked. And it was early mornings and late nights, and that's the way it ran. So that was the example you had set, right? Which is not unsimilar to that ranch rodeo community, right?
Absolutely.
Farming community. You got to get it done. Pigs need food on Christmas too,
or if they got
might be
out,
one less of them, but
right. Yeah. We're going to make some bacon out of that, dude.
Yeah.
Don't know where it went.
So do you think there's something there to that?
Oh, I definitely think that ranch rodeo, farming, agriculture.
Yeah.
There's no give to it, right? I mean, when you're bringing in grain, shelling corn or cutting beans, have to get it in, right? Because weather's coming, whatever. So you work till 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, try to get that field finished up or whatever. And I think that parlays right into the line trade, right? Post hole diggers, spats. They'd drop us off. We'd have 11-foot holes to dig, right? And they'd drop us off with our lunch buckets and come back and pick us up at the end of the day. No different than getting kicked out of the house, right? It wasn't no big deal. I mean, that's what we were doing. And I think from a farm lifestyle or ranch lifestyle, it parlays right into the line trade because there's not really a lot of difference. It's hard work and it's got to get done. And it's back to the mindset thing, right? It's really a very similar mindset or individuals are like-minded when it comes to line trade, work, farm, because it's just what you did. It's not we got to work till 11 o'clock tonight. Somebody hit a pole and broke it, right? Well, that hog barn needs washed because we got to move a brand new set of pigs into it, whether it's a farrowing barn so the sows can farrow, or if you're moving them into a grower or finisher, it all has to be washed and disinfected, and we can't wait, because we got to move pigs tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things. It's the same difference, and I think that when you pull from that community, you get that mindset a lot more than my 14-year-old plays video games, right? He's had a few little odd jobs, but he plays a lot of video games right now. He doesn't have to get up early. My kids are both homeschooled, and so it's, they don't have to catch a bus. So it kind of sets a tone. And for me, it's a little bit different because I always got up early. It was always time to go to work. Sun's up, it's time to go, which is a little bit different this time of year. But I think it all goes hand in hand with how you're brought up or what the expectations are from an early time in your life. It doesn't change much, right? A guy that grew up on a farm, if he's not in a line trade, he's still going to get up early. He's still going to put in the work. Whatever they're doing. So I think they're perfect candidates to pull into the line trade. It worked for me.
I think that's a lot of potentially what the issue is nowadays as well. Is just like you said, they're not forced. Kids typically aren't forced to do these things like get up early. It's hard things, right? it's hard to get up early as a kid. It just is. That's the way it works. That's the way you work as a kid. It's hard to get up early. Not a lot of kids are like morning people, especially when they hit like that working age, right? Like the 13 to 18, like time to sleep in, do some stuff. They want to sleep in, right? They're going through hormone changes and they're sleeping in. They'll sleep until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'll stay up all night. It's just the way they work. But I think that you're right on that. Like I was forced. We lived a half an hour from town. Like we lived a half an hour from school, where I went to school. So I had to be up early to get shit done in the morning in order to get out the door and get to school. And then a couple days a week, I had hockey practice, and hockey practice was in the morning, right? And so to get to practice, like you're up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to get to town, to get all your shit on and get on the ice by 6 a.m. You're off the ice by 7:30 and you're at school by 8. Like, kids aren't forced to do that a lot now, you know?
No, and it's like we talked about a little bit, you know, I think it's I forget how the phrase goes, but hard times create strong men, blah, 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 you know, and I think that's like a lot of...
We're on the back end of that cycle, aren't
we? Yeah, it's going downhill, you know. I forget who it is, but he talks about I'll drive a Chevy pickup. My kid will drive a nicer car. His kid will drive a nicer car than that. And then the next kid's going to be driving a beat up rust bucket, you know. Yeah. And it's the same difference. But I think that's kind of, you know, if we had to have 17-year-olds storm the beaches of Normandy today, probably be a whole different outcome than it was.
True story.
Back then. And I think that just goes hand in hand with where we're at, you know. But there's been a lot of good stuff happen in the line world with safety and things of that nature.
When did the line trade come into your life? How did that go about?
Oh.
How'd you land on the trade?
I was working at the hog farm, and Buddy and I were kind of playing around with riding bulls, and he wanted to learn how to do it better. And so we were hanging around. We grew up together pretty much, running around. And his dad was like, hey, man, they're hiring at the light company. You might make a better lineman than you would a rodeo guy. And so I, you know, he said, you can't put my name down, but we're hiring. And so I went up there and applied, and an exorbitant amount of applicants, you know. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get this job. And it's for a decent size investor-owned utility. And what they don't tell you is, like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of applicants, but it's in a downtown area. So there's some tests that eliminate a good bit of the applicants. And so then, you know, we got down to like 8 spots, and 2003, 2004, hired in, and worked for investor-owned utility in-house apprenticeship, and topped out. And it really changed my entire life, you know, going from farming to line work. Like, you mean if I work extra hours, I get paid more? Yeah. Like, what's this?
Nobody tell me about this? Yeah. This is bullshit.
So, yeah, no, for sure, right? And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And so, like, I'm working Saturdays. Storm comes in. I'll come in. Hey, boss, you need me to come in? Because I'm ready. You know, so it was, it changed my entire life.
Did you take to it right away?
For the most part. Once we got out of climbing school, man, it was... they were pretty hard on us. So, like, I say hard on us, but they want to make sure you were going to make it.
Sure.
So you go through 5 weeks of climbing school, nothing, just up and down, up and down, up and down. And then you build 7 different constructions with a brace and bit. We had a gain saw. So
all the kids now just went, what? What is a brace and bit?
There wasn't
this brace and
I forget what they call it now, the money wrench or whatever.
Hard money.
But yeah, so we had to build 7 different constructions with a brace and bit. And then one of the guys got caught cheating, so we had to take a gain saw, cut the top 8 inches of the pole off, so the holes would never line up. And so we did that. And once we graduated, and man, we had some hard-nosed instructors, super knowledgeable guys, been around the trade forever. Super fortunate to grow up in that environment. But man, if you wanted to quit, you quit. And they'd take a shovel, stick it in the ground, take your hard hat off your head when you quit, and hang it on that shovel. Boys, we're building a graveyard. Anybody else want some? And
damn, that's good.
Oh yeah. Well, and like, I mean,
that's legit,
dude. To be flat honest,
it's like buds.
The brace and bit dang near got me.
Yeah. You had forearms the size of your legs.
Oh man, dude, it was ridiculous. And I just remember, like, get through this. It's going to be different. And so, come out of climbing school, and they put you on a Highline gang because we had our own transmission that we maintained. And so we go out maintenance 8 structures. So you climb up one side, staple the ground wire, tighten all the nuts, go across the timber, tighten everything, shake it down. Yeah. And so we did that for weeks. And then we had a tower job that they put us on as grunts, and make sure that you're going to hang out. And like I said, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Met lifelong friends, still talk to guys that I haven't been there in 10 years and still talk to them. Not all the time, but we're still, it's the brotherhood, right? That it never goes away. Just because you leave a company or whatever, you still have guys that you talk to. Like I said, not every day, some every day. But it's definitely an interesting field to be in. And like some of the bonds that you build, you don't even realize you built them. And then it's like you're gone a year from the company and somebody calls, "Hey, how you doing, Tater? Just call and check in on you,
Yeah.
Like, hey, what's up, man?
Yeah, it's a while. I found that with it's I talk about this with my kids, stuttering a bit on this, but it's like I talk about it a bit with my kids. My kids, all they know is school, right? So they get caught up in like, oh, I'm leaving high school. Like I got a kid that's graduated. I got one on his way that's graduating, right? It's like their whole world is, like I made these friends, and I'm like, buddy, this is life. You're gonna make friends tomorrow, and you're gonna be best friends. You don't know how you'd ever do anything without each other. For 6 months, you'll be like that, and then you won't see each other for 6 years. And that's the trades. Like that's our trade in a nutshell too, right?
Oh yeah.
Especially if you're some sort of like a tramp lineman. Like you'll spend a year on a project, and you'll get tightly bonded with a few guys on that. You're just like, you're inseparable. You're the best crew you've ever worked with.
Oh yeah.
The greatest bunch of guys. You have the best time together, and it is the greatest time. And that job ends, and it's over. Like, hey, I'm heading home Friday. All right, see ya. And you might not see them again.
Ever.
Like, and you'll talk, and there's social media now and all kind of stuff. You get to stay in touch, but you might not see them ever. I've got a group of friends that I've met online through doing this podcast, a group of tight friends. We got a group chat going, and I've met them once in person, met them all once in person, maybe twice, and that's it. But like, I'd lay down my life for these guys.
Yep.
That's the way the trades are. And I'm trying to explain this to my kids. They're like, what? Huh? They can't even fathom this, right? Because their whole existence has been coming up for the last 6 years of high school with this group of people they can't imagine leaving.
And maybe 2 of them,
yeah,
they'll talk to you.
Yeah.
Like through the rest of their life from high school. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I've got a handful of guys that I still talk to from high school. But we were kind of like, the one guy and I kind of ended up turning into more like brothers. Actually, my son was helping him for a little bit, and we have this catchphrase of like, if we're ever like just bored or whatever, we'll text each other. The Malibu made it, because we were going fishing one day at school, after school, or no, we were out at school. We were going fishing, and this pond had a little swell to it, you know. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I can make it. I'm in a pickup, but it's just 2-wheel drive Chevy pickup, you know. He's like, oh, my Malibu made it. He had an old Malibu, you know. So I go down through there, man, we get stuck, have to walk. Like, I wouldn't call anybody to come get me. So I walked to the farm to get a tractor to pull me out. And so he's one of my best friends. And so now we're like, hey, the Malibu made it. You know, if anybody comes up with a stupid idea or whatever, you know, we're like, hey, the Malibu made it. But that's one of my
that's rad.
One of my closest friends that from school, you know, and yeah, they'll get over that school stuff. It's the trades are.
But that's the amazing thing about the trades too. Is like that's what this trade's done for me. Is it's given me a bunch of really rad friends all over the country, all over multiple countries. And I can go anywhere. Like I tell my girl this all the time, like, where do you want to go? You want to go? Like, especially when the whole pandemic was over and it was like time to go places again. I was like, where do you want to go?
Right.
It's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you just want to like get away for like, let's go to San Diego. Let's go to, you know, Texas. Like, we want to go somewhere. I know somebody that would gladly, you know, share a spare room,
right?
And we'd go hang out for a few days, and they'd be stoked. Like, and that's what's so awesome about the trade is like not many people have that all over the place, right?
No, it's like our own community, right?
Yeah. Even though I haven't seen them, or maybe I haven't even met them very much in person, I know they're like it's open door. Like, come on, it's an open invite all the time.
Come crash on the couch,
come crash,
whatever. Yeah.
Come hang out. We'll go here. So I've done it a couple of times now, and I would just say, hey, I'm going to be in the area for a couple of days. They're like, come on over, stay in the spare bed, and you go, and it's like, you know, campfires and cigars, and I take you to the beach, and I take you surfing. And it's like, I just think that that's so amazing. That is to me the brotherhood. And it saddens me when I see these posts online about the brotherhood's dead, the brotherhood doesn't exist, you know, whatever you want to say about it. It saddens me because that means that person saying that doesn't have that experience in this trade.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's kind of like life too, right? You get out of it what you put into it.
Good point.
You know, there's guys that are just miserable, man, and there's nothing you can do to change that mindset with them. Where
good point.
Like, I'm a firm believer you get out of it what you put into it, and maybe there's something lacking there. You know, maybe it's not, maybe there's something missing on that end, or maybe they don't belong in the trade. Because I can tell you that from my rural travel in the country, same experience, man. Like, I've had amazing opportunities. We'll talk about one of them off camera I didn't bring up, but last night. But it's just crazy that, you know, like you said, I think if you're a good person and you put effort into the trade, you're going to get it back. And that's what I love about it. I mean, from Canada to the Caribbean, man, it's there. I don't think it's dead by any stretch of the imagination. But if you're not putting anything into the craft, then you may not get anything out of it.
No, that's like probably the most legit advice for the guys listening. That I get a lot of people find this podcast when they're first coming into the trade to like learn about the industry and learn about the trade. And I get a lot of feedback online about that. Yeah, thanks. The podcast has really helped me understand like what this industry is all about, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And so that's like a really rad piece of advice is like you get what you put in, you get out what you put into it, right? It sounds simple. You've heard it before. It's cliche. It's all those things. But if you're putting in good vibes, you're going to get good vibes out. Like if you're putting in
just
goodness,
like life.
It's just like life. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I've met some really miserable people.
Yes. Facts.
But you know, I mean, that experience is going to suck for them. Yeah. But if you're happy and it rubs off, man, I tell you what, you can see a person walking down the sidewalk that's having a bad day and just say hi to him, and it changes the whole demeanor of that interaction. Yeah. And as opposed to just walking by him, you know, like this morning I was chatting it up with a valet guy. You know, it's just like, take time to talk to people.
Yeah.
Take time and understand people. And man, I'll tell you what, once a foreman sees that you want to learn, you take the time, and a foreman sees you want to learn, he's going to teach you. And that's the hard part for me, was keeping my mouth shut. You know, I'm a talker. I like talking.
I was going to say, were you always this way? Were you always a little bit of an extrovert?
Oh, yeah. My wife hates
go up
it.
and talk to people.
Yeah.
See, from the other side of it, for myself, I've always been introverted. Like, even to do something like, even this podcast, for example, every time I go to start an interview, or every time I reach out to somebody to see if they want to be a guest or something like that, there's a piece of me that like doesn't want to do it. It's an actual thing I have to overcome every time, because it's just not natural to me. Like, to just go up and talk to somebody, like that sort of thing, or reach out, which is, so I'm always interested from the other side. Like, how the hell do you do that?
Dude, it's just,
because it's an actual physical barrier I have to cross in order to make myself do it.
Man, it's just like in there. Like, I think it's just the way that I'm wired. Like, we were in Mexico on our honeymoon, and I'm like, oh, there's my Area 30 teacher. And my wife's like, bullshit. And I'm like, no, hang on, I'll go talk to her. So I walk up and talk to her, you know, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And my wife is like, do you know everybody? Like, because we're in Mexico on our honeymoon. And at that time, I'm only 22 years old or something, you know, and seeing people I know in Mexico. But I try to take the time to talk to people. I mean, I don't care if you're the valet guy.
Yeah.
If you're the janitor, the guy was mopping something up, and I say, hey, man, how's it going? You know, appreciate the hard work. Like, it's just what I do. Like, and I think that's part of the reason why I've gotten as far as I have, from a farm kid to where I'm at now. So
if you scale that down to like the trade level, and what are some examples of how you did that, like with crew dynamics in the trades and stuff?
Man, crew dynamics is so important. Like, because you're gonna get stuck on those trucks that you're just like, but you gotta grin and bear it. I remember one time they were doing a big mix up on the trucks, you know, and they're like, where'd you end up? And I'm like, I'm going to this truck. And they're like, oh man, you don't want to go to that truck. That truck's gonna do a bunch of work and this, that, and the other. And like a handful of people were like, you don't want to go to that truck. Man, it was the best experience of my life. It was, number one, I'm never gonna ask not to go on a truck, right? But number two is just like, well, that's where they put me. That's where we're gonna go. That's what we're gonna do, and we'll get through it. And it was probably my best 3 years of line work. Period.
What made it the best? Or was it like a mix of things? Like,
it was, so we would rotate guys some, but I was on that truck pretty much for 3 years. And sometimes I was the bottom hook and sometimes I was the top hook. But that crew leader just made it work. Like, it didn't matter who was on that truck, it worked. Now, we put in a lot of work. We were kind of like a trouble crew at night or in the evening time. If right before quitting time, if something happened, we'd go out and we'd take the job. They knew if they called, we were going to stay and do the job. So you get to see a lot of interesting stuff. It was just, from his standpoint, was, we got this job to do, and this is who I have to do it with, and we're going to make it work. But he was also one of the guys that would break it down, right? He'd let you work yourself into a corner and then be like, hey, what do I do now? And he's like, oh, well, then try this, try that. But he was never a guy that was like, this is the way we're going to do it. It was, how do you want to do it? And then he might say, well, if you do it like that, you might run into a problem here. But it was pretty much,
what do you think why do you think people would say you didn't want to go to that truck?
You know, after being on it, I don't know. Previously not being on it, that truck did a lot of work. I mean, you stop and grab something at the gas station on the way to the job, and then maybe on the way in we'd grab something. Maybe we wouldn't. But it was
straight production.
He was company's paying us. We're going to do the work. And I mean, for me, like I said, I learned so much on that truck. Like I'd been topped out 2 or 3 years. And I learned more in that last 3 years than I learned ever.
What was your attitude like? And do you think that kind of made the difference?
Oh no, sometimes my attitude sucked. I'm completely candid. Some days it was like, man, I don't want to do this. But we did it. It's like we had an inclement weather clause, right? But if it was just kind of misting, we'll work in it. Yeah. When it starts raining, and one of the things he would say is, I could dodge every raindrop in the city right now. It ain't raining.
That's awesome.
And but it was. But if it was bad, we'd tear down and get in the truck. But every payday Friday, we'd go to eat. We'd as long as our work was done, we'd wrap the truck up, and we'd go sit down and we'd eat us a nice lunch every other Friday. And when we had inclement weather, we'd go eat or whatever. But for just as a crew to go spend that hour and a half sitting down, eating together, we still talk today. 10 years later, I actually went down and saw him not too long ago, but we still talk. Hey, how's the kids doing? What's going on? He's got a boy and a girl, and so what's going on with them? And everything going good, and it's just I wish everybody could get on a truck like that for a little bit, because I really think you've got teaching trucks and you've got trucks, and that can make or break somebody too, right? You get on a truck that just does the bare minimum, you're probably going to be bare minimum.
It depends on what type of person you are too, right? And I know what you're talking about, getting on those crews that just don't want to do work when you're wired to work. It's tough because there's no amount of forcing you can do to force them to do any more than they're gonna do. And so it gets rough on you because you're just kind of sitting around a lot of the time. And if that's not what you want to do either, if that's not how you're wired to work, it's tough. But then the opposite exists as well. You get on a crew that's hardwired to run all day long, and just produce. And that's kind of not what you're into. It's tough.
It's going to be miserable.
It's going to be miserable. Yeah.
Yeah. On the just a truck, you can only rearrange the interlink so many times. Yeah. Sleeves. You can make that truck look pretty good, but at some point you're going to run out of stuff to do if you're a busybody. But I think that we're losing a lot of our old hand experience and knowledge. It's not getting passed on like it used to. Some of it was not a good way to pass it on, sure. But there's a way that that knowledge was so valuable, and companies are letting it just walk out the door, and it's not getting passed on to the younger kids in the trade like it did for us. And that's something I think that's lacking in our industry big time, is just the lack of knowledge transfer, if you will. I see it all the time, and I go around to a lot of different places, and then kid's got his hand line hanging on this side of the cross arm, and he's over here working, and I'm like, dude, your groundman is got that thing wrapped around the pole, trying to get that hand line up. To move your hand line out, Yeah. And it's just it's basic stuff. It's simple stuff that I think that is lacking in a lot of places.
I've been talking about this on the podcast quite a bit lately. Try to bring it up on every show because I'm interested on everybody's take on like apprentice master relationship, leadership. I kind of bring these two topics up on most conversations because I agree with you. I see in like places, in sectors of the trade, that it's still there. I still see that from people where that journeyman's, they're all about teaching. They bring whoever is around them and wants to or shows initiative or wants to learn. They're willing to show them and teach them and take the time with them. And then there's those journeymen that are just, no, it's not my job. It's not my responsibility.
Get in the bucket and do the work.
Yeah.
You can stay on the ground or you can get in the bucket.
But they forgot that they were taught by somebody at some point in time.
Absolutely.
Like, and not everyone's a teacher. I struggled with it as well, or was better at some parts of it than I was at others. I understand that. Like, not everyone is capable of teaching. But you can do it in your own way. Like, and it doesn't have to mean what you think it means. It just means paying attention to these guys, feeding them the little bit of knowledge that you do know, and being willing to do that. And I think it's important, and we gotta keep doing it, because if you don't, we're gonna end up like we are. You got the old guard and the new guard, and no one in between, or anyone in between is just making nothing but mistakes because they've had nobody teach them the real ways. It's a trade in the end, right? It's a trade. It's a craft, skilled labor trade, which means you learn on the job. And you don't learn on the job by doing it yourself. You can in some scenarios, but you should have somebody showing you, at least show you how to do it, let you do it, try, fail on your own, but then be there for you to show you like how to maybe succeed once you do fail at it. You know what I mean? I get left alone a lot of times to like struggle, which is fine. Fair enough. Go struggle with that hoist. Go struggle with that project. Get it all out. Like try to figure it out on your own. And sometimes you're successful at it. Sometimes you just struggle, and foreman or lineman just sits back and watches you struggle until it comes to that point where they've had enough. And here's the teaching moment. But it's in that moment you got to step up as a journeyman and go teach. Don't just like walk away from it. Oh, that guy's freaking useless, and let him just fail that way. Now's your moment. Okay, let's show you. Are you ready to learn? Yeah, I'm ready to learn. I struggled. I tried my ways. They didn't work. Okay, This is how I'd do it, or whatever. And show them the way.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't say that a kid doesn't know anything, or an apprentice. Shouldn't say kid. You shouldn't say an apprentice doesn't know anything if you haven't taught him anything, right? So, I mean, like I said, luckily I was, that truck I got on, man, it was just phenomenal. But not everybody's teachers, like you said, and then teaching isn't necessarily getting out a grease board, sometimes it's just having a conversation with a kid. There's a school down in Georgia, climbing school down in Georgia that I was pretty impressed with and went and visited. And, not only do they teach the kids how to climb and this, that, and the other, but they bring in a pastor to talk to the kids about life. They bring in a financial advisor, and it was really cool to see that part of it, because that's still teaching, right? A lot of these kids don't know what a checkbook is. Apprentices or groundmen don't know what a checkbook is, don't know how to do a ledger on a checkbook. So that's still teaching in a different form, right? So
that's huge. That's the other side of this. That's the other side of the trade too, is like, you can make really good money in this trade. It's not, that's not a hidden fact. That's fact. And that's well known by people. It's like, you can make a shit ton of money, but how many of these guys or girls coming into the trade are experienced with managing money? What's their relationship with money like? That's a great thing to like start teaching people.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they probably haven't got a relationship with money in a healthy way. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. They certainly weren't taught anything about it in school. So how are they learning this? Now they come into the trade, they make a pile of dough, and they just go and blow it.
And go buy a $100,000 diesel pickup truck.
All of it, all of the above, which is all great. If that's what's making you happy, that's what's making you happy. Whatever, you're probably going to lose it in the end anyway. But hey, whatever.
I tell guys all the time, so don't buy don't go buy a diesel pickup. You don't need a diesel pickup. You don't pull anything. You have no trailer. You have nothing.
But I'm going to hit the road and I'm going to buy a travel trailer.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy a camper and we're going to go.
No, you're not. So that's kind of funny. My top out truck was a Chevy Cavalier. I bought it brand new, but it was like $9,100. You know, AM FM radio only, 5-speed manual transmission. Like it had no bells and crank windows. Like I said, I want the cheapest car on the lot, and it was like the Chevy Aveo. You know, and I was like, oh, I can't drive an egg. What's the next cheapest car on the lot? And it was the Cavalier. You know, so that was my treat. But it got me as back and forth to work.
Yeah.
I think I had a pickup too at that time. But anyway, yeah, my advice to these guys, man, is don't go buy that truck. You don't need it. And then they put a lift kit on it and wheels and semi tires or semi rims and tires. And I'm like, what the heck? Yeah. But yeah, so that's what, you know, teaching comes in a lot of different forms. Whether it's financial or life. And then obviously I really think there's, like I said, I'm a firm believer in teaching trucks. And when you get a teaching truck, man, Katie bar the door because that dude's going to turn out. You're going to turn a lineman out of him. And it was just so night and day different that it'd almost be interesting to see how companies could put that into, I mean, even if you had to pay a foreman a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like, this is a teaching truck.
Yeah.
And you're going to take all the trouble jobs and get in all the weird scenarios. You know, that was the other thing, holding over in the evening time to take trouble calls. Like, you got to see a lot of different stuff other than just your normal construction and stuff like that. I mean, we did not a lot of crazy things, but some pretty cool, some pretty interesting jobs from that. So I guess more than anything for me, I wish guys every person coming up could get on a teaching truck.
Okay, guys, I only had Justin for a brief period of time in the studio, so we weren't able to get fully through our conversation. So I got Justin on the line, on the TV, remotely to finish up our convo about all the safety gear and tech side of things. So that's why you see a little bit of difference in here, and you might hear a little difference in sound. That's the reason why. All right, let's jump into it. Let's talk about FallTech. So let's start it off. Tell me about FallTech. Tell me what you're into.
Absolutely, man. So obviously, farm kid to lineman to sales guy to now getting to build some product and innovate a little bit, you know. Ended up landing a company called FallTech. It's fairly new to the industry.
Yeah, talk about FallTech. Where did it come from?
So FallTech's a company, they've been around for 32 years. The owner of our company, we're the largest U.S.-based fall protection manufacturer and probably in the world. But we're privately held by one guy, which makes a huge difference. We get to do a lot of things that a lot of other folks don't get to do because we have a leash, right? We get just enough rope that if we hang ourselves, we hang ourselves. But it's an amazing company. They've been around 32 years. Previously, the owner of FallTech had another company called CLC, which is Custom Leathercraft. And so they made tool pouches for the construction workers to put their nuts and bolts in, their spud wrenches, all that kind of stuff. And so it evolved into this, well, hey, you have all this material, make us a better harness. And so he started making harnesses, testing them, making sure that they met all the standards they needed to meet, which is a whole nother conversation in just a bit.
What industry was he making harnesses for?
So primarily was the construction industry and a little bit in the industrial market. Bread and butter was construction, hands down. And then got into a little bit of the industrial, and then 3.5 years ago, he decided he wanted to get into utilities. And so he hired myself and another guy. And so now we're building utility specific fall protection. And so the other guy and myself both come from the trade. We've both been in our tools, and we like to think we have an idea of what guys want, right?
Yeah.
It's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
The safety world, the comfort level, everything's constantly evolving, but we think we have a good idea of what guys want. So we'll start building product, and then we'll put it in the field. Say, hey, beat the crap out of this for 6 months. Come back, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, but more importantly, tell us what you don't like, because everybody wants to hear, oh, it's great, it's fantastic, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, we don't evolve as a trade that way.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, is like, tell me what you don't like, because that's what's going to make the difference. And some of the products we have coming out, like, I can't even begin to describe some of the stuff because some of it's still pretty low key. But some of it is, I mean, if guys had this 60 years ago, the hips, the knees, the elbows, just from being in better work positioning, right?
That's it, right? Like just even like you're talking about safety gear, but you're talking about stuff that you wear for a long period of time, right? When you're talking about like a harness, sometimes you're wearing that thing for 10 hours straight. So if it's riding you in the wrong spot, like that's what we need to know about, because you don't want to be that, that company that's making that harness that really gets you in the wrong spot over time, even stuff like that, right?
Well, let's be real, right? I mean, 10 hours a day, that's if you're not on storm work.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, yeah, it's a comfort thing, but safety's paramount. And we talked about this when I was in the studio. Canada, for whatever reason, seems to be ahead of the curve. They are leaders in safety, and then it trickles down into the U.S. And so I spent quite a bit of time up there with a handful
what's
of
your
companies.
like, sit on that for a second, because I've been asked this question. I was even asked it by Duke when I interviewed him a few episodes ago. He was interested in why that is. Like they're taking note of something like that. And I've spoke about it a little bit, but it'd be interested to hear your perspective on that. Like as an American who, spent their time, grew up down here, became a lineman in the US, and now you're in a safety role, you're developing safety products. Do you have any sort of perspective or take on why that would be? Like from a non-bias, like this is non-biased, right? Yeah.
I honestly don't. We had the utility I grew up in, we had a guy from Canada, and he's like, oh, the Canadian linemen are so good. They're this, they're that. And we're all like, go pound sand, dude.
Yeah. Exactly.
We're the greatest linemen.
Yeah.
But when you get out of the utility and you actually start traveling the country and see the different perspectives, and I can't put a finger on it or say, oh, it's this or it's that, but I think there's a different culture up there.
Sure.
Honestly, I think linemen are macho, period. But I think there's less macho up there and more of bringing everybody along at the same speed.
Sure.
And so when you do that, the utility I came from, there were some rock star guys. I wasn't a rock star guy. So I kind of fell back, and some other guys excelled. And then full circle, I ended up doing okay. But like, I feel like the time I spent in Canada with a couple of the big utility, one of them in Ontario, like the culture is just different there. Like it was pretty interesting to see, and I won't even say a culture, but more so the work practice. Like it was just different.
Yeah.
And I can't place it. I can't put a finger on it, but one of the guys that was a customer of mine, I say a customer very loosely. I don't have customers. I have friends. But 11 years ago, I started calling on him, and we just got off the phone the other day just to BS, and it's not, he's getting ready to retire. He's spent a good time a bit with the hydro up there, and he's getting ready to retire. And hey, I want to come down and spend some time with you, but you better get your butt up here before I retire so we can have a sales call. But it's seeing the way he interacts with his people is a lot different because he's in training.
Sure.
And so the way he reacts with his people is a little bit different than what I've seen down here. And so I don't have a good answer for you other than, it's different.
Yeah.
And like Reggie, I mean, you can see it.
Yeah.
But how do you get to that?
Your answer is very aligned with what I had said. It's just, I think it's just baked into the actual country culture. Like Canadians are just known that way, and maybe that has something to do with it, but I couldn't put a finger on it either. Other than it was just like cultural thing. I don't know. It was strange, but it'd be interesting to see like an actual study done on that. If it is a fact, for one, like if it is a fact, like let's see some data on that and why that is. I'm sure they actually have some data on it. Maybe that's why he was bringing it up and asking the question. But yeah.
When did Canada implement fall restrict devices?
I think that I'm pretty sure when you guys were still free climbing down here, Canada was doing some things with their skids and making some different sort of, like, I remember the old seat belt, the hip busters. They had this like retractable off of your hip, and you would just clip into anything, and you felt you were safe from that, I guess. I don't know. That was one of the dumb. It wasn't meant to use that way, but everyone was using it that way. They just like take it and clip it on something. So if you fell, you'd actually like break your hips in half or something. But we were trying. We were trying. Yeah, we were trying at least. Yeah. So I don't know.
Statistics and evolution, right?
Yeah, there you go. That's interesting. All right, so where are you based out of? Where's FallTech based out of?
So
FallTech, I thought this was pretty cool.
Yeah, so we actually manufacture out of Compton, California. So every piece of utility product, whether it's a retractable, a lineman belt, a tool belt, fall restrict device, harness, lanyard, it's all made in Compton, California. So we're bringing a little bit of the East Coast to the West Coast.
Which I think is so rad, because like we talked about in the studio before, like most manufacturing, especially in the sewing space, happens on the East Coast, does it not? Like that's where, all the equipment and old gear is, and all the old trades and craft workers, they still kind of live out in that west or that East Coast area, right?
A lot of it is, absolutely. Yeah. And part of the reason I think we're still in the West Coast is our owner is very loyal. He's got folks that have been with him since he started 30 years ago with custom leathercraft.
Sure.
And so to uproot business and move it to the East Coast or Midwest even, I don't think that's not in his deck of cards. He's a loyal guy that wants to keep things where it's at, because, I mean, let's face it, you take a company that's manufacturing in Compton, California, move it to the Midwest. I mean, your costs are going to go down substantially, but it's just not in the cards for us. Yeah. And I like being SOC, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people.
No kidding.
I wanted to name our fall restrict device the SOC, straight out of Compton, but marketing wasn't having it. But that's, it tells a tale, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like, that's
I think
where
it's
we're
legit.
From.
Personally, from a marketing perspective, I think you would you'd do pretty good with the SOC. But hey.
Well, but we're linemen. We're not marketers, right? Yeah. Well, I guess you kind of are now.
Hey.
But you still got that lineman background where it's like, oh yeah, that's cool. I dig that. Yeah. But the other thing about FallTech is it doesn't really matter if we're on the West Coast or the East Coast, but we have a lot of innovation in our products. we're not really making any products that are what I call me too products or lick and stick products that somebody else is making this and they're selling a bunch of them. We can do it too. If we're not bringing value to the lineman, to the company, uh, we're not really interested in making those products. We want to innovate. One of the products we have right now out that they're it's on the cusp of being out, but it's the first that I know of class 2 arc flasher tractable. And that's pretty huge. It's a non-metallic lifeline, class 2, tie off wherever you want. Not going to mar up insulators because it's not metallic, and it's arc flash rated. So that's with the new standard change and all that, that's a huge deal.
That is huge. I
And
imagine just even coming into this space, like it's a massive space. It's a massive like chunk of the industry to just like come in as a brand new, you're not a brand new business, but it's a brand new space for you to like enter into. I'd imagine you got to come into that with some products that are impressive, or it's like you just be like excommunicado, right?
absolutely. No, and that was kind of our MO, right? Is like, how can we make the industry better? How can we show people that we're serious about being in the utility space? Because when we talk to the owner about it, he's like, I want to leave a legacy. And that's pretty unique. I mean, there's other family owned companies out there manufacturing fall protection, but to leave a legacy, when you put that into perspective, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you put that on paper in the utility industry for a fall protection manufacturer?
Good point.
You build really good product.
Yep.
And hopefully, if the industry has us, which we've gotten pretty good reception so far, but I think that over time we'll prove ourselves with the product we're putting out. And it's like some of the stuff, we have a bucket rescue kit that somebody wants to see it. I'll literally fly their bucket 30 foot in the air, jump out in our unit, and come to the ground. Like, that's how we believe in our product at FallTech. We're not, like I said, we manufacture everything in house. We're not putting labels on stuff. With the new class 1, class 2 standard, the ANSI.21 that came out, we were one of the first fall protection companies that came on board and were ready when they wanted to push it out in 21, but didn't actually put it out until August of 23.
Cool. Talk some more. I want you to like, so from the perspective of the lineman listening to this right now, or just the guy out there that wants, like all of us, we love gear, right? Like most of us anyway, we're nerds for gear. We love new tech and new gear. And like, you always want to see what the new shiny thing is. So I know for the guys listening right now, they probably got their ears to speakers. Like, let's learn a little bit about like what you got for products, talk a little bit about them. Because we can't like show them here on the screen. So like talk a little bit about them. They can go look them up after, but talk about what makes them unique and what makes them special and what you're, like what you guys are thinking as far as like putting into these things, as far as kind of tech and interesting tech. Like you talked about a little bit about the non-metallic lanyard, things like that. Dive into some of those products and some of their like capabilities and what makes them unique and stand out from the other ones in the industry.
So, for example, our wood pole fall restrict device, we call it our Apex, is what they ended up naming it. They didn't go with SOC, they named it the Apex.
That's all right. It's a good name.
But, yeah, it's at the top of the curve,
There you
go. So the way we designed it, we went from the ground up. So it doesn't use the same rope as any other. It uses the same neoprene impregnated nylon strap on the back, the brown strap that our skids have been made out of for years. But the way that it works and interfaces with a pole is completely different than anything else because our cleats don't engage the pole until you cut out. The rope, the inner rope on the inside of the pole between you and the pole doesn't have to necessarily touch as long as the tips of the cleats are in adjustment. That's the only thing that dictates if the device is in adjustment or not. So you can actually have some gap between the inside strap. So as soon as you lean in, you've got slack to just flip it up the pole like you're hitchhiking. What we call hitchhiking for free climbers and not new students. So our lineman belt, our tool belt.
One sec. Let me ask one more question there, Tate. Let me ask one more question. With the skid, one of the things that I noticed, because like I came up not free climbing, but came up without like pole choker devices, really. Like when I first started, that's what it was like. And I like the ability to just like wiggle your hip a little bit and it will turn the belt. I found like with a lot of these choking systems, like if you want to swing, if you're on one side of the pole and you want to swing to the other quarter of the pole to say like you're working on one side of the cross arm and then you just want to like swing around without grabbing your belt or touching anything, swing around and work the other side of the pole. Like maybe you're working a jack on one side and you swing around and work the jack on the other. I find with a lot of these pole choking skids, the skid doesn't turn with you. Right. So you're kind of like, you're at a weird angle now and it's the weight of it's trying to pull you back around to the other side that you just came from. And it's a real, like, you got to like put your hands on it. You got to like shake it around and it doesn't want to go. And then, I don't know, it just wastes a lot of time and effort and energy. Does your product still have that kind of like disability?
So it still has to grab the pole to a bit, right?
Yep.
And I tell people, like, when I go out and demonstrate our device, I'm like, this is a climbing position, because if you start leaning really hard, it may scoot around with you. And then when you get to where you're going, here's a work position where you want your cleats so it doesn't scoot around. But to say that you can just like bump your hip and it'll slide around may or may not.
Sure.
But I can tell you, if you've got a service over your shoulder or something and you need to scoot to another quarter, like you can grab it with one hand and slide it right around.
Nice.
It's pretty free moving on the pole. And that was one of the things we sought after in the design of it, right? Is how can we make this the most ergonomic piece of equipment on a pole for a lineman that's got his hands full, that's got a cotter pin in his mouth? Like, how can we make this as good as we can? And so that's what we do with all of our products. Just like our harness, we patented horizontal leg straps. So instead of the leg straps of the harness coming through the groin, ours sit horizontal on your thighs so that you can bend over in the bucket and pick up a socket or a wrench, bug wrench, whatever you drop in the bucket, you can bend over and pick it up, and you're not going to talk in a higher octave voice because there's nothing pulling in the middle of your groin.
Gotcha.
It's things like that we look at really hard, because we're not just trying to make a product to sell. We're trying to improve the industry at the end of the day.
Love it. What else you got going?
Man, I'll tell you, for substations, stuff like that, the class 2 retractable we have out, substations, tower guys, even H structure guys, transferring across the static bar and stuff like that. Our class 2 device, I think, is really going to be something that hits. We're actually getting ready to launch it's a class 1 retractable. So fall protection gets muddy, right? And it's one of those things that I'm very passionate about, obviously, but it gets muddy and it gets convoluted. And so ANSI started enforcing in August of 23, the class 1, class 2. And there's some changes from previous class A, class B. But one of the big things is, at the end of the day, unless you're on a government job, which is big up in Canada, right? But you got CSA up there, not EN 385. So as long as you only have to be OSHA compliant, some manufacturers make retractables that are class 1 that are a cost-effective solution that can be tied off below D-ring height. So old standard was class A and B. New standard is class 1 and 2. Class 1 means, to simplify it, I mean, we can go from test weight change from 282 to 310. And old class A was 24-inch maximum deceleration distance. Class B was 54-inch. Now they're all 42. All that aside, when you get down to it, class 1 you can tie off overhead only. Class 2 you can tie off below D-ring height or above D-ring height. And like I said, it gets muddy, right? Because if a manufacturer says, we went above and beyond, tested this product, it's safe to use. So in a bucket truck, there's no sharp edge hazard. So a class 1 device will do what you need it to do. Because class 2, I mean, you're only going 18 inches below your D-ring. So with a class 1 device that a manufacturer's tested, as long as there's not a sharp edge present, like the one we're building, you can tie off at the anchor point, and if you fall out of the bucket, you're going to be 100% protected, and you don't have to get the class 2, which is typically a little bit heavier, a little bit bulkier, because it has to meet different parameters. So all that to say that at the end of the day, you need a good fall protection consultant, whether it's a manufacturer or if you have a great relationship with your sales guy and he's intimate in fall protection, great. But I refer to myself as a resource that happens to sell fall protection, not just a sales guy that sells fall protection. And that's where I encourage folks, reach out to me, because even if it's not my product, I will give you the best solution for your application. And I got some pictures the other day and I was like, man, we don't do that. But here's this company that does a really good job at it. Go see those guys because they'll take care of you. And that's what, at the end of the day, everybody goes home safe, everybody's comfortable, and everybody puts in a good day's work. Mission accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah. True story. It helps when you're from the trade too, right? Like you said, when you show up on site and they're like, well, prove it. You're like, all right, set your bucket truck. Let's set your bucket truck up. I'll go up, I'll fly it and drop out of it and prove you. I'm not afraid to,
Put some pads down. Let's put them outriggers down and let's go.
Yeah, that's dope.
And that's probably the biggest enjoyment out of my job is I don't lead with like, hey, I was a lineman for 11 years and we did transmission distribution. It's just like, hey guys, you need some fall protection. Here I am. Yeah. And then, it doesn't take long. And
it's important when you can speak their language, right? Like you're not speaking sales language, you're speaking their language, which is like hugely important, right? And you're not just BSing their language either. You're like actually speaking it because you know it.
So many times we get caught up in this standard says this standard says that. We don't get caught up in the why as much as we need to. Why do I need to do this? Because you're going to go home at night, and here's why. It's like a lot of my sales presentations, and I'll probably leave you with this because I don't want to take up a bunch of your time, but when I go into an audience of guys, usually it's at a dock and it's raining like it is here right now, and it's a pretty crappy day. And the first thing I do when I walk in is I'm like, hey guys, at what height constitutes a serious fall? When do we worry about a fall? Because when I was a kid, I jumped off my well house that was like 5 foot off the ground, right?
Same.
And just tuck and roll, right? Like that's what we did as kids.
Your knees
jump
hit
out of
your
gravity
chin
bed wagon and hit the ground. Yeah. So what constitutes a serious fall? And then I'll ask him. I was like, so does anybody know who Dr. Adkins is? And you remember Dr. Adkins? I see by the nod of your head. His eat meat and cheese guy, right? And you lose all this weight. Had a Manhattan townhouse. Icy morning, walking out of his Manhattan townhouse, had a 4-inch stoop. Slipped, fell backward, died of basal skull fracture.
It's amazing.
So how many times are we in more hazardous positions? I won't say dangerous, I'll say hazardous because we can mitigate it, right? But how many times are we in more hazardous positions than Dr. Atkins walking out of his house?
All day, every day.
And then some guys still don't want to do anything about it. That's what was frustrating for me when I got into the safety house, the safety side of things. Is at the end of the day, you're getting paid.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost you any more to go through your checks. Like every harness, whether you're in a lanyard or retractable, that's another big conversation I like having. I walk in, you guys still using lanyards? Oh yeah, we're using lanyards. How much fall clearance do you need to your next closest object to not hit it? 8 foot, 10 foot, 12 foot. Keep going, guys. 15 foot, keep going. And it's like 17 and a half foot. With a retractable, you can mitigate that a whole bunch. But our trade is still stuck in this is what we've always done. This is what we're going to keep doing. That retractable is another $50 more. We're going to keep using our lanyards, And so there's a whole plethora of different things to have conversations about in the trade. But
most guys just haven't had a fall either. Like if they've had a fall, I'm going to say most of them have fallen while attached to the pole, right? Wearing their skid, they've fallen, and their fall restraint has done its job at some point. Some people, that's a lot further of a fall than others. Sometimes you come all the way down for some unknown reason. It just doesn't work properly, and that's what happens. But you got some friction there, and whatever the scenario is, you're not falling off of the pole and falling, like free falling to the ground. 'Cause that happens really quick, like really freaking quick. Like most people have experienced that little 2-inch drop of doom where your belt slips and you feel that drop, but just imagine nothing stops you. It's crazy. I've taken a couple of whippers, just like in the wintertime, in my spare time, sometimes I climb frozen waterfalls. And I've taken a couple whippers.
You're a glutton for punishment, bud.
I ice climb a little bit, and I've taken a couple little whippers, man. And you fall. And sometimes I've been, 5 feet or 10 feet above my anchor point, but you're not just falling 5 or 10 feet. You're falling that plus 5 or 10 feet, whatever distance you're above, you're falling that below plus a stretch in the rope. And I'm telling you, man, it happens so fast. Like, and you're not expecting it, and it just happens, and you fall and you take that whipper, and it's like, whew. So like these guys, I don't know why, like you said, you're getting paid for this too, right? Wear your gear, wear it properly. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth doing it. Like it's worth doing it.
Man, I'll tell you, I saw a picture one time, Ryan, and I guess I'll probably leave you with this. I don't know how much time you have, but
we're good.
We company I worked for a while back, we had a picture floating around of a guy that had his leg straps improperly adjusted, took a fall, and he sent a picture in, and he's laying in a hospital bed. And I don't know if this is kosher or not to say, but he had both testicles out of his sack, and they were both ruptured because those leg straps, they're going to the pelvic bone, because that's when the arresting force is going to start and your deceleration is going to start in the energy absorber in your lanyard or retractable. So when those leg straps meet the pelvic bone is when the fat lady sings. And if they're not adjusted properly, I mean, I see guys all the time, their leg straps get caught on their knees when they bend down and stand up. That's one of the kind of little things I run them through is like, hey, squat down and then stand up, and their leg straps get caught on their knees and they can't stand back up. Those leg straps need to be adjusted for a reason. And it's because I'm going to go out on a limb and say 90% of the workforce is men. And there's a lot of precious tissue that is in between the legs that those leg straps are going to entangle when they hit the
Yeah.
pelvic bone. And I mean, like we talked about, you get paid for it, just do it, you know? And it's a hard thing for some guys for some reason.
Talk about it.
But I'm
Talk
not
about
afraid to call them
adjustment for
out.
a second. Talk about adjustment for a second, because I think it's not only just, see, like, I like what you're doing with innovating, and, you know, I haven't tried horizontal leg straps, but if it's like you're saying, that sounds interesting to me, because for all those reasons that we're talking about, guys not wanting to wear this stuff. And if they are wearing it, they're not wanting to wear it properly because, you know, maybe you're in winter clothing and then you're shedding a couple of layers by the afternoon and your harness is now loose. And I don't know, just stuff like that sounds interesting to me, that you're thinking outside the box and you're not just making a shape that everyone's made. You're looking at it, you know, if you are doing it that way and you're looking at it and going, how can we make it better? And you're actually putting some innovation and some R&D and some actual thought into making things better for us. That's super interesting to me. And I don't know why anyone else out there wouldn't be interested in at least like looking at something like that and going, okay, let's see if it's facts here. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's put it through its paces and see if it does what they say it does. But you know, that's so. When I was in studio, I talked about, you know, giving back to the community and helping out at the Little League Diamonds, and then becoming an 4-H firearms instructor to teach 4-H, and didn't even have kids in 4-H at the time. NRA, all that. But I found that I had a passion for instructing. And so that's my whole MO when I go somewhere is, obviously I want you to buy stuff from me, but that's not my end game, right? My end game is to see those light bulbs. If I see a couple of light bulbs come on, you know, I feel like I've done my job at the end of the day. I'll go home. I don't care if you buy anything off of me or not. Because really, I don't sell anything. It all goes through other people. But at the end of the day, that's the whole goal, is to educate people and bring them up to speed.
Yeah.
I got handed stuff and said, here's your stuff, go to work. Yeah. Right. And so for me, when I got into the sales / education role, it was a whole different ballgame, because I didn't know that my dorsal D-ring needed to be in between my shoulder blades as high as I could get it. Right. My leg straps, I didn't know how tight they needed to be. They just needed to be on if somebody could see me. If somebody couldn't see me, I was 40 foot in the air in a bucket truck. Hell, who needs leg straps, right? So there's a whole caveat of things that are going on there. But, you know, leg straps properly adjusted, you should be able to slide your hand in there, and when you roll it over, it should be about 2 fingers wide by the time you get done. Your dorsal D-ring needs to be sitting as high as it can be in between your shoulder blades. And there's a thing called a subpelvic strap. This is nerding out a little bit in fall protection, but underneath your butt cheeks, there's a horizontal strap. And that should sit right at your butt cheeks, because that's the biggest muscle in your body. If you impact your fall protection equipment, that's going to absorb a bunch of the load. And that's what we've done with our horizontal leg straps, is that subpelvic strap takes most of that load when you fall into your harness.
Interesting.
So yeah, so it's there's a lot of science behind fall protection. A lot of guys think, hey, here's my harness, here's my lanyard, I'm going to go to work. But there's a lot of science behind it, and there's a lot of testing. You know, that's another thing that's unique about FallTech, if we're just sitting here talking, is we publish all of our declarations of conformity online. So if you go to a product and you're like, oh, that's cool, wonder what it does. I don't even have to have a meeting with your standards guys, because you can go over and go to downloads, and right there's a declaration of conformity, tells you how it passed in every single test that it got put in.
That's super interesting. I always didn't like gatekeeping anyway, right? Like, I I think the world's moving more that way because it's so easy to find information out. And if you're not publishing results, people think you're faking things, and, they just don't want to believe you, right? Because the world's just becoming more transparent. It's just the way it is, especially with technology. You're just in AI and everything. So that's dope that you're just like, here you go. This is the facts, fact check us.
I mean, if you don't, and I'm not saying that people have anything to hide, but at the end of the day,
yeah,
we have the paperwork, so why not share it?
Yeah.
And so that's what transparency and innovation are two of the biggest things. And, you call our customer service, you're going to get a person, which is pretty stinking cool. You're not going to get sent to some other country. They're sitting right there in Compton, California. So customer service is huge. Transparency, innovation. And then, my big thing, what I tell everybody is I under promise and over deliver. And I think, one of the big things that we focus on, especially in the utility market, is making sure we have product on the shelf, because distributors might not want to stock it, because we're fairly new in the industry. Shame on them. They're going to find out. But having it on the shelf, because if somebody calls and orders something, they needed it 2 weeks ago, forgot to order it last week, and now it's an emergency, right? And so that's what we're trying to do with keeping product on the shelf. And it's, it's pretty cool. Anybody that wants to find out more can reach out to me. Be more than happy to answer questions or anything I can do for them.
I got one more question for you. It's just around rejection criteria. You got anything to say on like what these guys should be looking for as far as like when to reject some of their safety gear? Like it's not just, there's a lot of guys that listen to this that work for some smaller mom and pops and some smaller, co-ops or something. And they don't necessarily get new gear all the time and that sort of thing anyway. So when can they, is there anything you got to offer around rejection criteria, something they should be looking out for with their gear?
So we've got a whole inspection. You can download inspection forms on our website for harnesses, lanyards, retractables, and it shows you all of what to look for. But I'll just go into harnesses and lanyards real quick because they're kind of a lot of the same. I break it down into 4 different things: hardware, software, webbing, and labels. So hardware is going to be anything metal. If it's deformed, if it doesn't look like it did when it was manufactured brand new, it needs taken out of service. If it's got pitted rust on it, it needs taken out of service. If it's got some surface rust on it that you can spray some WD-40 on a rag and wipe that rust off, good to go. But when you get pitted rust, it actually changes the molecular makeup of the metal. And then nobody can say anymore, when it was manufactured and as long as it was in good shape, it meets X. Well, if it's got pitted rust in it, that metal's thinner in places, it's not gonna, it has to come out of service, because you can't say that it meets the criteria of what it needed to make. Webbing, soft goods, if cuts, nicks, tears, frays, burn holes, you get in an arc flash event and that splatter gets on there. And so we manufacture both nylon harnesses that are arc flash and Kevlar. Our Kevlar harnesses are super, super durable. They're more expensive because they're a premium product. So we do offer the nylon, but the Kevlar is just an amazing product that is resistant to all of that stuff, and it wears really well in an arc flash situation. Hopefully the guy just needs a new pair of underwear, and his harness is going to be good and everything else, didn't get hurt, just needs to clean his drawers out, good to go. Labeling's one of the things that's pretty important, actually. From an OSHA standpoint, that labeling it has all the criteria of that harness, the standards it meets, the capacities, whether it's ANSI 130 to 310 or OSHA 130 to 420. So all of that labeling has to be legible. You have to be able to read every bit of it. If you can't read anything on there, technically that harness has to come out of service. Now, there's a lot of companies that are going to be like, man, it says and. I can put the word and in there and it's good. And it is if you don't get caught, right?
Yeah.
But the labeling has to be legible and it has to be there. So that's one thing we do. We protect all of our labeling with jackets and housings around the harnesses and stuff like that, so they don't get premature wear and they're not sitting there rubbing on each other and rubbing the ink off. And then last is stitching, right? Depending on the manufacturer, they'll tell you how many broken stitches you can have in a stitch pattern. So when you look at a harness and you see that square that has the little back and forth and the zigzags in it, that's a stitch pattern. And the manufacturer dictates how many broken stitches you can have in that pattern before you have to take a harness out of service. So,
awesome.
Highlight recap. Make sure there's no rust, debris, bent, broken, deformed hardware, soft goods, no cuts, nicks, tears, sprays. Labeling has to be on there, has to be legible, and then stitching. Refer to the manufacturer of the harness to tell you how many broken stitches you can have in a stitch pattern. And that same exact thing translates for a lanyard or retractable, other than the retractable has to lock up.
Love that. That's dope, dude. Well, I appreciate this, man. I loved our conversations and I see no reason we can't do this again.
Man, you let me know, dude. I love to get information out there. I want it to be good. I want it to be viable to the guys. And I think we hit the nail on the head this time.
Heck yeah.
With getting that information out. And like I said, if you get anybody that says, hey, I want to learn more about this or whatever, or if there's something that keeps coming up that guys want to dig deeper into, I'd be more than glad to come back on and have that conversation and figure out how we can help.
I don't know if you might as well just share the website. And I don't know if you want to throw an email out there or just put the website on and let them go through the channels that way if they have questions. But
honestly, the easiest way, Ryan, is just get a hold of me directly. After we met last time, I was like, the website's a little bit cumbersome in the utility segment because we're so new. And I'm not controlling, but I like to have a pulse on what's going on.
Sure.
And so if guys have questions, they want to see some product, want me to come out and visit a rodeo or a safety day or anything like that, they can reach out to me at Tate at FallTech, FallTech.com. And that's the easiest way to go about it. And if they want to go to the website, it's just www.falltech, FallTech.com. And they can poke around in there, but it's like I said, it's a little cumbersome because it's still under development. I mean, when you're working on products and marketing and website and everything else, it's cumbersome, and we're trying to do the most important things first.
Yeah, buddy. I appreciate it.
And so that's where we're at, brother.
Love it. It's dope, dude. Appreciate you. All right, guys, once again, hope you got some value out of the episode. I know I did. I enjoy every single one of these conversations, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. One more time for the folks in the back, if you could like, subscribe, follow, make sure you're following either in audio form and video form on YouTube. Much appreciated. All right, guys, play safe. Peace.